Ever feel like you're trying to talk to your parents about like life choices and stuff, and it's like you're speaking two totally different languages? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into the source of that tension, respect. Or, maybe more specifically, the lack of it. And get this, we're not just talking about kids showing respect. We're flipping the script and looking at the parents' role in all this too.
It's so interesting because, we spend so much time talking about these generational differences, but we rarely ever get to hear a raw and honest conversation between those generations. And that's what makes today's deep dive so fascinating, honestly.
I totally agree. We're going behind closed doors for this one, eavesdropping on a conversation between a parent and their 18-year-old. Think about it like a master class in how to navigate those choppy waters of parent-child dynamics.
Yeah, and it's a masterclass that throws us right into the thick of it too, challenging what most people just consider a given. Respect equals obedience.
Exactly. It's not just about yes or no, ma'am. Like the son in our dialogue actually asks, what if I don't agree with you? Is that still respectful? And get this, the parent's answer is not what you'd expect.
Because it totally flips the script.
Yeah.
The parent's like, disagreement is totally normal, it's healthy even. And then they go on to emphasize that respect is more about how you disagree. Like actually listening to the other person, thinking things through, and not just dismissing them because their view is different.
Oh, I like that. So they're saying, hey, you're entitled to your opinion, but let's at least try to understand where the other person is coming from.
Exactly. They're acknowledging that respecting someone doesn't mean you have to blindly accept everything they say. It's about, valuing their opinions enough to actually engage with them thoughtfully. Even when you disagree, you can still be respectful.
This reminds me of being a teenager. You're just bursting with all these ideas, totally convinced you know what you're doing, that I got this feeling.
Oh, tell me about it. That's universal for anyone who's ever been a teenager.
For sure. And the son in the dialogue really captures that frustration so well. He talks about feeling unheard, like his opinions don't matter. And the parent, instead of getting defensive,
They actually say, I get it, we mess up too, it's not always easy.
Wow. Seriously, as a parent, can you imagine actually saying that to your kid?
It's huge. What makes it so powerful is that the parent is admitting their own fallibility, which then creates space for their son to be fallible too.
Like saying, hey, we're both on this journey of life, figuring things out as we go. It's not about being right or wrong all the time, but about being open to understanding another person's perspective.
Yeah, and that illustrates the whole idea of mutual respect that this dialogue's all about.
Yeah.
It's not one person dictating the terms. It's about both sides acknowledging and valuing the other's perspective, even when they don't agree. And that can be really tough, especially when it comes to things like, independence.
Oh, absolutely. Picture this. You're 18, you crave that freedom to make your own choices, even if it means stumbling along the way. I mean, who hasn't felt that? But at the same time, you're still figuring out all those expectations your parents have and all their anxieties,
And that's where this dialogue gets really interesting. It highlights this perspective we often forget about, the parents. They talk about how their interference, at least that's how the son sees it, often comes from a place of love and worry. They've lived longer, seen a few things, and naturally they want to protect their child from heartache.
Okay, but real talk, haven't we all been on both sides of that? We want the best for our loved ones, let them learn and grow, but wouldn't mind wrapping them in bubble wrap at the same time, right?
Right, classic dilemma, and this dialogue brings that tension to life beautifully.
And I think this is where understanding the psychology behind the parent's perspective is so important. Because they're not just trying to control their kid, right? They're operating from this place of deep-seated care and concern. It's all shaped by their own experiences, societal expectations, even that biological imperative to protect their child.
Which brings us to a point that often gets lost.
Yeah.
Parents, they're human too.
They come with their own baggage, anxieties, and past experiences that shape how they approach parenthood. But here's the thing. Even though the son is pushing for his independence, wants that freedom to make his own mark on the world, he also craves something else, something that's super important.
He wants his parents to trust him and understand him, wants to be seen as capable, even if he messes up sometimes.
And this is where I think so many listeners, no matter how old they are going to relate. Haven't we all wished for that unwavering belief from the people who matter most? That feeling of, I got this, but reciprocated.
100%.
Yeah.
It's not about shutting your parents out entirely. It's about wanting them to be there, to understand, even as you're figuring things out on your own.
And in the dialogue, there's this really vulnerable moment where the son says, sometimes it feels like you guys just don't trust my judgment. And instead of getting defensive, the parent responds with
empathy.
yes.
They admit to being afraid, to wanting to protect him from getting hurt. And in that moment of vulnerability, something really interesting happens.
Because they're not just talking at each other anymore, right? They're listening, actually trying to understand the feelings behind the words.
Exactly. And by actually saying that out loud, by saying, this is where I'm coming from, the parent opens the door for a totally different kind of conversation, a dialogue built on mutual respect and understanding.
And that shift right there from like confrontation to connection, that's where I feel like this whole respect as a bridge thing comes into play.
Totally. That's the heart of it. In the dialogue, they even talk about finding a balance, and it's not about one person always being in charge, but more about finding that sweet spot where both sides feel heard and respected.
Which, let's be real, takes some serious communication skills.
And you know what's amazing? The dialogue itself is like a perfect example of healthy communication.
Yeah.
The son actually speaks up about his feelings. The parent really listens and then repeats back what they're hearing. And they both actually try to find some common ground.
Yeah, it's like they're modeling exactly what they're talking about. Like that part where they're discussing, learning from your mistakes. The son wants the space to mess up sometimes, which, come on, we've all been there. And the parent gets it. They acknowledge that sometimes the best lessons are the ones you learn by, like, tripping up yourself.
It's gotta be tough for parents, though. On the one hand, you want to protect your kids from pain, obviously, but then you also know how important it is to let them learn and grow through their own experiences. And in this dialogue, the parent actually encourages their son to, explain his thought process, to share his reasoning before jumping into something head first. It shows that they actually value his opinions, even if they don't always agree with them.
It's like saying, hey, I hear you, I see your point of view, and even though I might not be totally on board, I trust your judgment.
Exactly. There's this unspoken understanding that they're on the same team, that ultimately they both want the same thing, what's best for the son. And that shared purpose, that foundation of love and care, that's what makes building a bridge of respect even possible. Without it, you've just got two people on opposite sides of this chasm, unable to actually connect.
And isn't that what it's all about? It's not about pretending you agree on everything. It's about building a bridge of understanding over those differences. Realizing that even when you disagree, you can still respect the other person's perspective and try to see where they're coming from.
Exactly. It reminds me of this quote by the Dalai Lama. He said, "Disagreement is part of being human, but disrespect is not."
Oh, I love that, because it shows that disagreement doesn't have to be disrespectful. It's often those times when we disagree that we learn and grow the most, right? As individuals and in our relationships.
For sure. And this dialogue shows that so well. It reminds us that healthy relationships, especially between parents and their kids, aren't about these power struggles or always needing to be right.
They're about finding that balance, right? Between being independent and staying connected. Between respecting your differences and nurturing that shared bond that you have. A bond built on mutual respect and understanding. And honestly, I think that's something we could all use a little more of.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
It's like they say, you can disagree without being disagreeable,
Totally. And that's what makes this whole thing about respect so important. It's not just about families, right? It's about approaching everything with curiosity and empathy. Whether it's your family, work, or even those online arguments everyone gets into these days. That ability to bridge the gap is so important.
It's like that bridge isn't just connecting two sides. It's about making a space where those differences can exist, where you can challenge each other and learn and maybe even surprise each other.
And that's what I like about this dialogue. It doesn't try to make it simple, like one person is right and one is wrong. It just shows how complex relationships really are. It reminds us that we're all just figuring things out as we go,
And isn't that kind of comforting in a way? We don't have to have it all figured out perfectly. We can mess up, make mistakes, change our minds.
As long as we can admit when we're wrong.
Yeah.
And be open to learning and growing from it.
That's right. So we're wrapping up our deep dive here, and I keep thinking about that bridge image. It's not just a thing that's built once and you're done.
Right. It's a process.
Yeah, it's constantly being built up, fixed, and sometimes you got to start over if there's a storm.
And we're not using bricks and mortar to build this bridge either. It's all empathy and understanding, that real respect for each other,
I like that. So we're not just building one bridge. It's respect is something we have to keep building throughout our lives.
Exactly.
Well, this has been great. It's a good reminder that even when we don't see eye to eye, there's always that possibility of connecting, finding understanding, building those strong relationships.
Couldn't agree more.
that bridge of respect, it might be the most important one we ever build. Thanks for listening, everybody.